Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to move." The voice broke the calm of the first-class cabin like a pebble falling into still water, small yet creating ripples that spread endlessly. At 35,000 feet above the Colorado sky, Aerolumen Flight AL-127 glided smoothly, a silver line cutting through the clouds. In seat 2, a black man in a charcoal suit was reading a quarterly report on his iPad. In front of him, a neatly folded copy of the Wall Street Journal rested beside a cup of coffee, still steaming. His name was Daniel Brooks, 41 years old, CEO of Brooks Holdings, the parent company of the very airline he was flying on. But no one on this plane knew that. The flight attendant who had just spoken was Emily Parker, 28, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun secured by the navy ribbon of the Aerolumen uniform. She smiled the way one does when taking a customer service exam with invisible judges watching. "This seat is reserved for our Platinum member, sir. I'm afraid I have to ask for your cooperation. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience." Daniel looked up. His gaze was calm, but something in it made her smile, falter half a beat. He didn't answer right away, not because of fear, but because he was listening to the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Slow, steady, like the ticking of a distant clock in the quiet cabin, the rhythm of a man used to being judged before being heard. He set the iPad down, his voice low and composed. "I'm sorry, but I believe there's been a mistake. I purchased this seat 3 weeks ago. First class, clearly." Emily swallowed. Other passengers began to look up. In seat 3C, an Asian woman, Ava Lee, a famous travel blogger, raised her phone, whispering to her followers on a live stream. "Something's happening in first class. A passenger is being asked to move." In that instant, the atmosphere shifted. Every gaze turned toward Daniel. The air grew heavier, as though every cubic foot of the cabin had been compressed. Daniel remained seated, back straight, hands folded. He didn't resist. He wasn't the impulsive kind. But behind those steady eyes was an undercurrent, a tide of memories from countless times he'd been doubted, dismissed, told to prove he belonged. Emily turned slightly, looking for help. From the galley, Kyle Bennett, 45, the head attendant, appeared. He carried himself with the stern confidence of someone used to giving orders, not negotiating. "What's going on, Emily?" he asked. "The passenger in seat 2. A refuses to give up his seat for Mr. Whitaker, our Platinum member," she replied. Kyle glanced Daniel up and down. The Tom Ford suit, the Patek watch, the polished Oxford shoes. Everything screamed expensive. But to Kyle it looked borrowed, as if the man wearing it could never truly belong in first class. He raised an eyebrow. "So Mr. Whitaker has been a loyal customer of our airline for over 15 years. I'm sure you understand. This is a medical situation." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "May I see the documentation confirming that I'm sorry, sir? We can't disclose another passenger's medical information. Then at least I'll need both of your names and employee IDs. I'd like to file a formal report." The air froze. Emily hesitated. Kyle straightened, then read out his ID aloud, his tone sharp, almost daring. Daniel took a Montblanc pen from his breast pocket and carefully wrote each number on the back of his boarding pass. Each stroke of ink was like a blade carving into the surface of prejudice, quiet yet permanent. In Ava Lee's camera frame, the live chat exploded. "This looks bad. Is this racism? He's too calm. Something's off." Daniel didn't look at the phone. He didn't argue. He simply smiled, a calm, grounded smile, not defensive, but the quiet confidence of a man who knows his worth even when others don't. Mr. Whitaker needs seat 2. Kyle repeated more forcefully now. Daniel nodded slightly. All right, I'll move. But I'll keep your business cards. He stood, adjusted his tie, folded his newspaper, and picked up a brown leather briefcase, its corners worn from years of travel, the only thing he carried on every business trip. A heavy silence filled the cabin. Ava's camera followed his every move. No one spoke, but everyone knew they were witnessing something wrong. Emily swallowed hard. She hadn't wanted to do this, not really. She was only following procedure. But sometimes procedure is the perfect disguise for prejudice we don't even realize we carry. Daniel bowed his head slightly, then walked down the aisle toward the back of the plane. In the economy cabin, several passengers recognized him, the man who had just been asked to leave first class. Some looked at him with pity, others with curiosity, and a few raised their phones. He took seat 14B next to a college student wearing headphones. The young man looked over and whispered, "Man, that looked messed up." Daniel replied with a faint smile. No anger, no sadness, just the silence of someone who knows that the real fight is never waged through arguments, but through action. He opened his laptop and logged into Aerolumen Airlines' internal system. The company logo appeared, the very logo he had personally approved 2 years ago. His cursor hovered over Policy 12.4, Anti-Discrimination. Daniel read each line, the blue light reflecting in his calm eyes. Any discriminatory behavior based on race, gender, or origin will result in immediate termination of employment. He took a screenshot and saved it in a folder labeled Aerolumen Incident. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the Rockies, painting the sky in shades of crimson. In that light, Daniel Brooks whispered to himself, not with anger, but with certainty. True justice doesn't need noise. It only needs timing. The plane continued to glide through the clouds, but in that quiet economy cabin, a plan had already begun, silent, precise, and powerful enough to change an entire industry. No one in the economy cabin knew that the man who had just been asked to move down was actually the head of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And in first class, those who believed they had just witnessed a proper procedure had no idea that in that very moment, the history of Aerolumen Airlines had quietly taken a new turn. The plane began its descent, and the captain's steady voice came through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing in Los Angeles in about 10 minutes. Please fasten your seatbelts." The sound made Emily Parker exhale in relief. She believed everything was settled. Her hand trembled slightly as she stacked her clipboard, a strange feeling stirring inside her, as if she had just escaped a situation she wasn't sure was right or wrong. In row 14, seat B, Daniel Brooks unlocked his phone. The screen lit up with messages from his executive assistant, Monica Reed. "Just saw the video. It's spreading fast. The hashtag Aerolumen Racism is trending number 3 in the United States." Another message followed. "PR, legal, and crisis management teams are on standby. How do you want to handle it?" Daniel typed only 4 words. "Prepare emergency meeting." In seat 2, a Thomas Whitaker, the man who had taken his spot, was on his laptop, speaking loudly into his phone. "Tell Henderson's team the deal needs to be signed before noon tomorrow. I don't want any delays. And send flowers to the PR team. I just got priority seating in first class. Excellent service." As always, Ava Lee, still live streaming, captured a few seconds of him laughing loudly. Her chat feed erupted instantly. Disgusting. He's bragging about it. The guy he kicked out is still on the plane. The view count jumped from 2,000 to to over 5,000 in just minutes. Ava swallowed hard, her gaze shifting from the man in first class to the quiet passenger in row 14. She knew she was capturing something much bigger than a minor incident. In the cockpit, Captain James O'Connor received an internal signal. Kyle Bennett's voice came through his headset. "Just a small seat reassignment, Captain. Everything's under control. Any passenger issues? No, sir. Just a misunderstanding with a black passenger, but it's resolved." The captain paused for a moment. "Make sure no one records it." "Yes, sir." Kyle ended the call and straightened his collar. He had no idea that dozens of phones had already recorded everything, and the first clip was spreading at 20,000 retweets per minute. In the economy cabin, Daniel Brooks kept working. He opened his laptop, logged into the Aerolumen internal portal, and entered the CEO override code, an access level granted to only a few within the company. The admin dashboard appeared displaying hundreds of charts, reports, and policies. He scrolled through each tab: customer satisfaction, legal settlement costs, employee behavior reports. The numbers on the screen were cold, like symptoms of a hidden disease. Customer satisfaction had dropped to 3.2 out of 5. Discrimination complaints had risen 47% in the last quarter. Legal settlements now exceeded $2.3 million a year. He stopped and read the note at the bottom of the report, written and approved by himself 6 months earlier. There is no tolerance for bias. If we lose our customers' trust, we lose everything. A flicker of bitterness crossed his eyes. No one had believed it could happen until it happened to him. The plane trembled slightly as it cut through the clouds. Outside, the sunset washed the metal wings in crimson light. Daniel smiled faintly, a sad yet determined smile. He opened another message. "Legal has prepared the policy violation file," Monica wrote. "Media is requesting an official statement. Do you want to delegate this to PR?" Daniel replied, "No. I'll handle it. Personally." Meanwhile, in first class, Emily Parker was checking seatbelts one last time. She could feel the stares of passengers piercing through her professional smile. In her mind echoed the line Kyle always repeated during training: "We serve everyone equally, but VIP guests are always a bit more important." Today, that but more had become the gap between dignity and mistake. As she passed seat 2, her eyes met Ava Lee's. No words were exchanged, just a cold stare and a phone camera still recording. Emily knew she had been caught. 3 minutes later, the captain's voice returned. "Cabin crew, please prepare for landing." Ava whispered to her viewers, "He's still sitting in economy, calm as ever. Whoever he is, this isn't over." Daniel closed his laptop and folded his hands gently. He looked at his watch. 4:17 in the afternoon, Los Angeles time. Another message popped up: emergency meeting scheduled for 5 o'clock at the Aerolumen office, LAX, Monica wrote. "Good," he replied. "Invite HR, legal, and communications. Include station manager Ramirez." He placed his laptop in his bag, his expression steady, as if he had just closed a billion-dollar deal instead of preparing to fire an entire flight crew. When the plane's wheels touched the runway, a few scattered claps echoed through the cabin. But no one was truly relieved. The air felt thick, heavy, with the weight of something wrong. Ava ended her live stream with a trembling voice. This can't be the end of the story. The screen went dark, but dozens of clips were already being reposted, shared and multiplied. Within 20 minutes, the incident had become a trending headline across social media. The plane taxied toward the gate. Daniel remained seated, unhurried. He looked out the window at the city lights of Los Angeles, beginning to glow like thousands of eyes watching. He thought of his father once, an airport mechanic here, who used to tell him, "You don't need to shout to be heard. Just do what's right, and the world will fall silent." Daniel closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He didn't need to shout. He only needed to decide. In that moment, somewhere in his mind, the gears of power began to turn, not with anger, but with the calm precision of someone who knows the rules of the game and how to rewrite them. The cabin door opened. Golden light from the terminal spilled in, mingled with the flashes of passengers' phones. People turned to look at him, the man who had been forced out of first class, now walking as if he owned the sky itself. Daniel Brooks tightened his grip on the leather briefcase in his hand. Inside it were documents, evidence, and the authority of a man they had underestimated. He stepped off the plane silent, yet every footstep echoed a truth he carried within. Sometimes justice doesn't begin in a courtroom, he thought. It begins with a seat that was taken away. And for Daniel Brooks, justice had just taken flight. The cabin door swung open, and the stream of passengers poured out, like a river finally released after being dammed for hours. But among the rushing crowd, one man walked slowly, very slowly. Daniel Brooks. The leather briefcase in his hand felt heavier than usual, not because of the papers inside, but because of what it represented: power, truth, and justice waiting to be named. Terminal 5, Gate 56. The air around the jet bridge was thick with murmurs. Dozens of people had gathered. Some were filming with their phones, others were still live streaming their voices, breathless with excitement. That's him, the guy who got kicked out of first class. He's so calm, like he knew this was coming. Ava Lee, the travel blogger with more than 500,000 followers, stood near the exit. When Daniel approached, she raised her camera slightly and spoke softly but clearly, "Sir, I'm the one who recorded everything. I'm so sorry for what happened. Would you like to say something to my viewers?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes showing neither blame nor anger. "Thank you, Ava. You did what many people wouldn't: record the truth. Keep filming. In 10 minutes, you'll witness something worth remembering." The words made Ava freeze for a moment. It felt like she had just been given a role in a real-life movie. She tightened her grip on her phone, heart pounding, sensing that whatever was about to happen would explode across social media. Behind them, Emily Parker and Kyle Bennett pulled their crew bags through the jet bridge, speaking in hushed, tense tones. "Have you seen social media?" Emily whispered. "That woman's video is spreading." Kyle frowned. "Nonsense. These things died down in a few days. We followed protocol." But in Emily's eyes there was something else, an uneasy shimmer caught between fear and regret. A short distance away, Thomas Whitaker, the man who had taken Daniel's seat, stood with his assistant phone pressed to his ear, his voice confident, almost smug. "Yes, send the limousine to Gate B. I want to make the 5 o'clock meeting. Oh, and email Aerolumen to thank them for the excellent service." Across the hall, Daniel quietly approached the Aerolumen service desk, where staff were handling delayed flights. The woman behind the counter, Jennifer Walsh, the service desk supervisor, greeted him with a rehearsed smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" Daniel placed a white business card on the counter, embossed in gold lettering, "Daniel Brooks, Chief Executive Officer, Brooks Holdings." Jennifer froze. She read the card twice, her eyes widening before she looked up at the man standing before her. "Mr. Brooks." "But you mean you're—" "Yes," Daniel replied calmly. "I'm the passenger your staff asked to give up his first-class seat. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried so clearly that everyone nearby stopped breathing. "I need to speak to your station manager. Right now." Jennifer stammered. "Why? Yes, sir. One moment, I'll call immediately." She dialed the internal line, her voice trembling. "Station Manager Ramirez, please come to gate 56B. Urgent. The CEO of Brooks Holdings is here." The people around her looked stunned. Some turned to each other with mouths open. Ava nearly forgot to breathe. She clutched her phone tighter, never taking her eyes off the lens. 3 minutes later, Carlos Ramirez, the station manager, appeared. A man of Latin descent in his late 40s, he hurried forward, his face caught between confusion and fear. "Mr. Brooks, I had no idea you were Daniel," raised his hand, signaling for silence. "We'll talk," he said firmly. "Right here." At the place where it happened, Ramirez glanced around and saw dozens of phones filming. "So perhaps we could move to a private office." No, the humiliation happened publicly. The lesson should be public too. Ava stepped back a few paces, adjusting her angle. Her viewer count jumped from 8,000 to over 20,000 in just 60 seconds. Behind her, Emily and Kyle had arrived, still unaware of what was unfolding. "What's going on?" Kyle whispered. Jennifer pointed toward the front, where Daniel stood beside the station manager. Emily's eyes widened when she saw the man from seat 2A and the card on the counter. "No way," she whispered. Daniel opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick file labeled Aerolumen Airlines Acquisition Agreement. "Mr. Ramirez," he began evenly, "Brooks Holdings acquired Aerolumen Airlines 18 months ago for $860 million. I am the controlling shareholder and chairman of the board." Ramirez went pale color, draining from his face. "My God, I had no idea." "Of course," Daniel said calmly. "And that's precisely the problem. In a company that should represent service, your staff just violated Section 12.4 of the Employee Handbook Anti-Discrimination Policy. I want the 2 employees involved, Emily Parker and Kyle Bennett, here immediately." Kyle tried to steady his voice, though his heart pounded. "Sir, I believe this was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding does not include judging passengers by the color of their skin." Daniel said, his tone low but sharp as a blade. Emily tried to speak. "I didn't know you were. I didn't know." Daniel met her gaze. "You didn't need to know who I was. You only needed to know I was a person. And you failed to see that." For a long moment, the gate area fell silent. The only sound was the soft clicking of a keys, Ava's live stream still running. 32,000 people were watching live. In the chat window, comments flooded in. "This is unreal. He owns the airline." "Those attendants are finished." Ramirez took a deep breath and turned to Daniel. "Mr. Brooks, please allow me to call an emergency meeting in the office to handle this properly." "No. Everything will be handled right here in front of the people who witnessed it. This isn't just an incident. It's a reminder to the entire industry that dignity doesn't have a seat class." In that instant, Ava understood this was no longer just a plain drama video. This was a lesson in human dignity, unfolding live at the scene. Daniel gave her a small nod, his eyes carrying an unspoken message. "Keep filming." Then he spoke louder, his voice firm and clear across the terminal. "I am Daniel Brooks, Chief Executive Officer of Brooks Holdings, the parent company of Aerolumen Airlines. On Flight AL1272 employees of this airline asked me to leave my first-class seat because I didn't look like someone who belonged there. Today, right here, we begin to change that." The area erupted in murmurs. A few people even began to clap. Ava tried to steady her camera, her hands trembling. Daniel lowered his gaze, closed his briefcase, and the sharp click of the lock echoed through the gate, a sound that felt like the sealing of a new chapter. In the distance, Thomas Whitaker turned around, annoyed. What's all that noise? Don't these people know who the real customers are? He didn't realize that within minutes, the real customer would be the man with the power to decide the fate of the entire airline and his own. Daniel Brooks looked up, his eyes calm yet resolute. Behind him, the lights of LAX glowed against the wall, illuminating the Aerolumen logo. It was the perfect backdrop for what was about to happen, a confrontation that would be broadcast to the world, where justice would wear the face of a CEO wronged by his own company. The temporary meeting room at Gate 56B felt as dense as a storm trapped behind glass walls. Outside, hundreds of passengers still watched with phones, raised the cold light of their screens, washing over their faces inside. Daniel Brooks sat at the head of the table, hands interlaced back straight, his calm gaze making the room itself seem to shrink. Station manager Carlos Ramirez faced him like a student summoned to the board. To Daniel's left sat Emily Parker and Kyle Bennett, uniforms still creased from the flight faces, pale as paper. To his right, Jennifer Walsh, the service desk supervisor, clutched a notebook with trembling hands. A temporary sign was taped to the glass door behind them. Meeting in progress, do not enter. And yet everyone knew the world was already inside, thanks to the thousands watching Ava Lee's live stream. Begin. Daniel said, his voice low and even yet heavy enough to still every breath. He opened his leather briefcase and drew out a thick Aerolumen file. This is the merger agreement between Brooks Holdings and Aerolumen Airlines. I signed here. He touched the raised signature as chairman of the board and controlling shareholder, which means everyone in this room falls under my direct authority. The air collapsed, as if the oxygen had been pulled out. Kyle swallowed. Emily clenched her hands. Ramirez slumped back in his chair. Grey-faced Daniel tapped a finger on the table. Before we go on, understand this is not about me. This is about the culture you are sustaining inside this company. He turned to Emily, Miss Parker. Do you recall the line in the cabin crew training manual, page 14? Section 3, silence. Every passenger is a story, not a status. He said, I wrote that sentence, and today you proved it. Lives only on paper. Emily opened her mouth to speak, but Daniel raised a hand. You do not need to apologize. Apologies are what people offer when they are caught. I want to hear the reason. Emily's voice shook. I was just following procedure. So Mr. Whitaker is a platinum member. He has a health issue, and... Did you verify medical documentation? No, sir. Did you confirm with the reservation system before asking a customer to vacate his seat? No. Daniel nodded and exhaled softly. Thank you, that is clear. His eyes moved to Kyle. Mr. Bennett, you are the lead attendant with 20 years of experience. What do your actions say about this airline? Kyle lifted his chin, clinging to the notion of rank, sir. I only wanted the flight to run smoothly, if I had known you were. No, Daniel's voice cracked through the room for the first time like a hammer on the table. That is the problem. You do not need to know who I am to behave with respect. Human dignity does not have a seat class, and it does not require a title to be recognized. The room went silent outside. Ava held her phone and hardly breathed. Comments flooded the stream. That line gave me chills. He is dismantling them with calm. This is what leadership looks like. Daniel opened his laptop and cast it to the large screen. The Aerolumen logo appeared. Then charts, customer satisfaction, down 18%. Discrimination, complaints, up 47%. Legal costs exceeding $2 million per year. This is what our company is paying, he said. And today your behavior is the most vivid example of why we are failing. He clicked again, and Ava's live stream played the moment Emily asked him to move, the moment Kyle defended procedure, the moment Whitaker laughed. The audio hissed through the room. Sir, please do not make this difficult. He is a platinum member. Emily lowered her head as tears spilled. Kyle stared at the screen, as if seeing himself for the first time through other eyes. The door swung open. Thomas Whitaker stepped in, coat tossed over a shoulder, face annoyed. What is this? I thought the flight was over. Ramirez moved to block him. Daniel gestured for him to stop. It is all right. Let Mr. Whitaker in. Whitaker entered, voice dripping with disdain. I hope you are not making this a big deal. I am a loyal Aerolumen customer. I have the right. Daniel turned the screen toward him. Mr. Thomas Whitaker, chairman of Whitaker Industries, with an annual freight contract worth $4.7 million with Aerolumen. Correct? Whitaker froze. Yes, but what does that have to do? Daniel continued. Brooks Holdings, parent of Aerolumen, currently holds 23% of your company's shares. I approved that contract. Color drained from Whitaker's face. Daniel rose and walked closer, his voice low each word. A clean cut. You used privilege to take another man's seat. You taught my employees that power permits them to forget respect. And today I am here to teach you the opposite. Whitaker's mouth opened, but no words came outside. Ava's hands shook as she steadied the camera. He owns part of Whitaker's company, too. This is unbelievable. He is teaching them live. Justice is poetic. Daniel returned to the table, his tone cold and clear. Emily Parker and Kyle Bennett. As of this moment, you are suspended from duty, pending disciplinary action. The entire incident will go before the executive board within 24 hours. Mr. Whitaker, your company's contract with Aerolumen will be reviewed, along with your membership privileges. Emily broke into sobs. Kyle bowed his head. Whitaker stumbled back and stammered, "You cannot do that." Daniel looked straight at him. I already have for a heartbeat. The world seemed to stop then. Applause rose from beyond the glass. It began with Ava and spread like a wave. The passengers who had witnessed everything now clapped and chanted, "Justice, justice." Ramirez turned away with wet eyes inside him. There was not only fear, but a shame laced with respect. Daniel Brooks stood amid the applause with no expression except a far horizon in his gaze. He knew this would not end here. Today was only the beginning of a reform that could make the entire airline industry look in the mirror. He closed his laptop and murmured as if to himself, "Justice does not need a stage, only an audience awake enough." Ava heard every word and captured it within 30 minutes. The video had more than 5 million views. And outside the glass door, as Daniel left the room, the applause still echoed like the sound of a new era beginning. The sunset slid across the glass walls of Aerolumen Corporate at LAX, reflecting the silver trails of departing planes outside. Amid that golden glow, a conference room sat in unnerving silence. On the door, a metal plaque read, "Conference Room, executive access only." Inside, Daniel Brooks sat at the head of a 10-meter walnut table, his hands resting in front of him. He didn't need to speak or command. The room stayed silent on its own. To his left, attorney Rebecca Hall had her laptop open and microphone on. To his right sat station manager Carlos Ramirez, and beside him, the two flight attendants, Emily Parker and Kyle Bennett, their faces pale and exhausted, still in their wrinkled uniforms. All three looked like defendants in a courtroom they never expected to enter. The white light above them illuminated everything evenly too bright for anything to remain hidden. Daniel lifted his head. "Begin recording." Rebecca nodded and activated the digital recorder. Emergency meeting number 448, June 12th, Aerolumen LAX headquarters. Presiding officer Daniel Brooks, CEO of Brooks Holdings. Purpose to review violations of Section 12.4, the anti-discrimination policy. The words hung in the air like an indictment being read aloud. Daniel leaned back slightly, his gaze passing calmly over each of them. "Before we talk about law," he said quietly, "I want to talk about humanity." He paused. "Ms. Parker." "Mr. Bennett, through 20 years in the aviation industry, I've learned one truth. No passenger is ever just a passenger. Each one is a story. And today the two of you have written one of the darkest chapters in Aerolumen's story." Emily lowered her head, trembling tears falling onto her uniform. "Sir, I didn't mean to. Daniel interrupted, his tone soft but firm. "Not meaning to doesn't erase the damage. Ask the person who was hurt if they care about intent." Kyle clenched his fists, trying to steady his voice. "Sir, with all due respect, I've worked here for 20 years. I know the protocol. If I had known you were—" "Don't say that." Daniel cut in sharply. "The fact that you didn't know who I was is exactly why I'm here. Because if you only respect rank, not people, then the problem with this company isn't in the procedure. It's in its soul." Rebecca spoke next. "Internal reports show the live-streamed video of the incident reached over 8.6 million views within 4 hours. Aerolumen's stock dropped 3% after the footage spread, but recovered by 5% after Mr. Brooks's public statement began circulating." Ramirez lowered his head, voice small. "Sir, the responsibility is mine too. I failed to supervise my crew properly." Daniel turned to him, his expression softening. "You'll have the chance to make it right, Ramirez. But these two," he glanced back at Emily, "and Kyle need to face the truth." He pressed a button on the remote, and the large screen descended. Footage from Ava Lee's video played before them. Emily's voice echoed, "Sir, please, this seat is reserved for our platinum member." Then Kyle's voice followed, "You have 30 seconds to comply." The sound filled the bright room, dry and merciless like hard evidence. Emily wept openly. Kyle hung his head. Ramirez couldn't bring himself to look. Daniel's voice was steady, every word landing like a verdict. "Emily Parker, Kyle Bennett, you have violated Section 12.4 of the Aerolumen Airlines Employee Handbook, which states any act of discrimination based on race, gender, religion, or origin results in immediate termination of employment." He paused for a breath. "I wrote that policy, and I will enforce it." The two froze in place. Emily cried out in despair, "Please, sir, give me a chance. I have rent to pay. I have an elderly mother." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. A flicker of sadness passed through his face, but his tone remained calm. A real chance begins when a person learns the lesson. Today is not your end, Parker. It's the beginning of self-reflection. But Aerolumen cannot allow prejudice to fly with our passengers ever again. He signed the 2 termination papers, placed the pen down. The faint click of the pen echoed like a chill through the room. The air felt heavy. Rebecca spoke softly. "So the media is requesting an official statement." Daniel rose, straightened his tie, and looked out the window where planes lifted off into the night lights. "They'll get a statement," he said. "But not about who we fired, about what we're changing." He turned back his eyes, steady his voice, resonant like a vow. "Starting today, Aerolumen will implement a real-time passenger feedback system. Any discrimination complaints will be investigated within 24 hours. Every employee from pilots to ticket agents will complete 40 hours of annual bias awareness training, re-evaluated quarterly. Additionally, I will establish a $500,000 yearly scholarship fund for minority students pursuing careers in aviation. That's how we'll turn a mistake into transformation." The room fell silent. Ramirez swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Sir, that's a major reform. We'll need more time, more budget," Daniel interrupted, his gaze unwavering. "The budget for dignity is never a waste." Outside, Ava Lee stood with a group of reporters. When the doors opened, Daniel stepped out, not with anger, but radiating absolute composure. The journalists surged forward. One called out, "Mr. Brooks, are you seeking revenge?" Daniel stopped, looked directly into the nearest camera. "If I wanted revenge, I'd have done it on the plane," he said quietly. "But I don't need to prove I was right. I need to make sure the wrong never happens again." That answer spread across social media within minutes. The headline on Aviation Today read, "CEO removed from first class turns humiliation into historic reform." Night fell, yet the Aerolumen office lights still glowed. Daniel stood alone before the window overlooking the runway. The lights of hundreds of planes lined up like artificial stars, each carrying people's stories and the hope of being treated with fairness. He touched the cool glass gently. "We can't change the past," he murmured, "but we can stop it from repeating." Behind him, Rebecca placed a file on his desk, labeled New Corporate Equality Policy Draft 1. Daniel smiled faintly. The door opened, and he walked out, not as a victor, but as the guardian of a legacy being reborn. The sunrise over Los Angeles glowed across the city's glass towers, but for Aerolumen Airlines that morning was anything but peaceful. In the company's media operations room, a massive screen flashed with a red headline hashtag Aerolumen Racism, 12.8 million mentions. Dozens of news outlets were running the same story: CEO removed from first-class seat on his own airline. From CNN to Fox Business to the BBC, Daniel Brooks's name filled every headline. Everyone was asking the same question: how will he respond? In a temporary office on the 8th floor, Daniel Brooks wasn't reading the news. He stood by the window watching Aerolumen planes take off one after another, as if no crisis had happened the night before. But he knew this wasn't a crisis. This was the moment to redefine the soul of an entire brand. Rebecca Hall entered, carrying a thick stack of reports. "The stock is climbing again, sir. Strangely enough, the more people watch the video, the more they support you. Positive comments are over 80%. Daniel nodded slightly. "Good. But we can't rely on sympathy. We need trust." He turned toward his desk, where the crisis communications team waited. Lisa Chang, Director of Communications, activated the projector and spoke quickly. "This is the spread map. Ava Lee's original clip has nearly 12 million views, and the shortened version with the quote, 'Dignity has no seat class,' has surpassed 25 million. Lisa took a deep breath. "You've become a symbol, sir. But symbols can easily be distorted." Daniel closed his eyes for a few seconds, then said, "Then we'll redefine it. It won't be the story of one man. It'll be the story of a system learning how to make things right." The door burst open. Monica Reed, his executive assistant, hurried in. Phone pressed to her ear. "So Good Morning America, The View and CNN Prime all want live interviews this morning. Which one should we take first?" Daniel answered immediately. "Whichever will let us talk about solutions, not headlines." Good Morning America, perfect. 10 a.m. topic. Turning humiliation into reform. Monica smiled faintly and left to arrange it. In the next room, the PR team buzzed like a storm about to hit. Specialists pinned possible headlines on the whiteboard from seat 2A to an airline revolution. The CEO who turned, hurt into human rights policy. Aerolumen redefines global standards after one flight. Lisa glanced at the clock. We have 3 hours to make him the face of awakening, not a victim. Meanwhile, Ava Lee sat in a cafe across from the airport, her phone buzzing non-stop. News agencies called back to back. "We need an exclusive interview, Ava. Can you share what the man in the video is really like?" Ava smiled softly and shook her head. "He doesn't need me to speak for him. He's already speaking to the entire world." She started a live stream, her view count climbing to 97,000. Her voice trembled slightly, but her words carried emotion. "I was just the one who hit record, but it was his calmness, his silence that taught me this. Sometimes the strongest way to resist is to keep your dignity." The quote spread like wildfire. A new hashtag began trending, #dignity, at 30,000 feet. 9:30 a.m. The main conference room at Aerolumen LAX was packed. Every executive from regional directors to legal advisors was present. Daniel entered his calm presence, commanding the entire room to stand unconsciously. He looked around, then spoke slowly. "Last night we did the right thing. We admitted our mistake. Today we have to do something harder. Turn that mistake into a new standard." He nodded to Monica, who displayed the first slide. The screen read, "Project Phoenix, Rebirth of Aerolumen." Step 1. Daniel said, "Voice steady, mandatory, 40-hour yearly training on unconscious bias for every employee, including the executive board." Step 2. He continued, "Activate the real-time passenger feedback system this week. All complaints will go directly to HR and legal within 24 hours. No cover-ups, no delays." Step 3. His tone deepened. The Brooks Aerolumen Scholarship Fund. $500,000 per year for minority students pursuing aviation careers. Goal 100 scholarships every year. The room fell silent. Then David Kim, the CFO, spoke carefully. "So these initiatives will cost nearly 1% of our net revenue. Finance may object." Daniel replied instantly, "And if we don't act, the cost of lost trust will be 10 times higher. Brand value isn't measured in dividends. It's measured in public faith." A moment passed. Then heads began to nod around the table. At exactly 10 o'clock, the live interview began. On camera, Daniel Brooks sat upright in a navy suit and silver tie. The host asked Mr. Brooks, "Did you feel offended when your own airline staff asked you to leave your seat?" Daniel smiled. "I felt grateful, because sometimes you have to be pushed out of your seat to see the full picture. They didn't insult me. They helped me see the illness within the system." The host leaned forward. "What message would you like to send to those who watched the video?" Daniel looked directly into the camera. "Don't just get angry. Take action. Anger lasts a day, but change can last a generation." The studio went silent. Then applause erupted. The line instantly spread across thousands of posts captioned, "Anger is a reaction. Change is a responsibility." That afternoon, Daniel returned to his office. His phone rang non-stop. Major airlines, Delta, United American were calling, asking to review Aerolumen's bias training program. Rebecca spoke softly. They want to collaborate on an industry-wide model. Daniel smiled. Good. Sometimes to change the world all it takes is losing one first-class seat at the right time. Late evening. He sat alone in his office, city lights reflecting off the glass. Outside, people moved, planes lifted, and somewhere out there small stories were being rewritten. He opened his email. A new message from Ava Lee read, "Thank you for proving that truth still has value. My final video reached 32 million views. I'll use the revenue to start a fund for minority student filmmakers. P.S. They're calling you the man in seat 2A. I think it suits you." Daniel finished reading and smiled. He looked out at the Los Angeles sky, painted in orange and violet. "If every insult is a stone," he whispered, "then I'll use them to build the road to justice." The fading light reflected on the Aerolumen logo, glowing bright, a promise that from now on, every flight would carry the most precious thing of all human dignity. 3 weeks after the incident known as Seat 2A, the world still hadn't stopped talking about Daniel Brooks. But by now, the story was no longer about a single event. It had become a cultural symbol, a mirror reflecting how society was relearning the meaning of one-word respect. At Aerolumen headquarters in Los Angeles, the atmosphere was unusually alive. From early morning, hundreds of employees gathered in the main hall for the launch of the Unconscious Bias Training Program Dignity Flight. The massive LED screen displayed a single slogan: "Don't just fly high, fly right." Daniel stood on stage wearing not a suit, but a neatly rolled-up white shirt. Below him, department heads, flight attendants, engineers, even janitors filled every seat. No one spoke. Only their eyes moved between remorse, curiosity, and hope. Daniel began slowly, his voice calm and steady. "I'm not here to revisit the past. I'm here because I believe that every organization, no matter how good, can suffer from the blindness of bias. And that illness only heals when we dare to look into the mirror." He paused and glanced toward the third row. There sat Emily Parker, silent. She was no longer wearing her Aerolumen uniform. After her dismissal, Daniel had sent her an email. "If you truly want to change, come to this class." Not as a flight attendant, but as a human being learning to see others again. She had come on time. Their eyes met. Daniel didn't smile, but he nodded. It was forgiveness without words, and a lesson far deeper than punishment. The session opened with a montage images of diverse passengers smiling on Aerolumen flights, intercut with the empty seat. 2A now a shared symbol of memory. Lisa Chang, Director of Communications, addressed the crowd. "Starting today, every Aerolumen employee will complete 40 hours of annual training, and our real-time passenger feedback system is now active on 100% of our aircraft. We're no longer making promises, we're proving them." The hall erupted in applause. Among the crowd were faces that had once doubted Daniel, now looking at him with genuine respect. At the same time, 12 floors above, a global conference was underway at Aerolumen's headquarters. On screen, COO Patricia Wilson presented data. Since implementing the new policy, customer satisfaction has risen 11% in just 2 weeks. 300 feedback reports have been resolved within 24 hours, and 80% of participants rated the process as transparent and humane. A voice from the Singapore office said, "We at Asia Wings would like to license Aerolumen's real-time passenger feedback system. This could become a new global standard." Patricia smiled. Exactly what Mr. Brooks hoped for. That afternoon, Daniel walked down the sunlit hallway of the Los Angeles office. Along the walls were photos from around the world. Aerolumen pilots smiling with passengers, flight attendants, bowing to children, engineers standing proudly beside the company's new logo. Beneath each photo was a simple slogan, "Respect is our altitude." He stopped before one particular photo, a first-class cabin seat, 2A bathed in soft light, empty. Someone had placed a small plaque on it, the seat that changed everything. Daniel smiled faintly, placed his hand on the plaque and whispered, "Sometimes to fly higher, you must first touch the ground." Evening fell, and the city lights began to glow. At the University of Southern California, a forum titled "Leadership and Ethics in Crisis" was underway. The auditorium was packed with students, journalists, and young leaders. Daniel stepped onto the stage to a long-standing ovation. The host asked, "Mr. Brooks, many people now call you the man in seat 2A. How do you feel about that title?" Daniel smiled. "I don't see myself as the main character. That seat doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone who's ever been overlooked or told they didn't belong. And if each of us just once dares to stand up and claim our seat of respect, the world will change." The entire audience rose again, applauding loudly. A brown-skinned student, tearful, raised a hand. "So did you ever feel angry when they treated you that way?" Daniel was silent for a few seconds, then replied softly, "Yes. But I learned something. Anger is fire. Justice is light. If I let the fire lead me, I'll burn everything down. But if I follow the light, I can lead others forward." The hall fell utterly silent, then exploded into applause. When the event ended, Ava Lee, the woman who had filmed the original live stream, walked onto the stage. She was now an ambassador for the Dignity Flight program. She handed Daniel a framed photo, the first picture she had ever taken of him, sitting quietly in seat 40B between two ordinary passengers. Below it, she had written, "Sometimes a downgrade takes you higher." Daniel accepted the frame with a quiet nod. The audience stood again, flashes lighting up the hall. That night, Daniel returned to his office late. He stood alone, gazing at the runway, where Aerolumen planes lined up for takeoff. The red and green lights blinked against the glass, steady as heartbeats. His phone rang. It was Rebecca Hall. "So 3 major airlines have just invited you to serve as a human rights policy advisor for the entire industry. They say Aerolumen has set a new standard." Daniel looked out at the sky and replied gently, "It wasn't Aerolumen that changed. It was the people within it." He ended the call, opened his laptop, and finished the opening lines of his paper, titled "White Paper on Ethical Aviation Leadership." The first sentence was his own quote, "A seat may measure status, but only dignity measures true altitude." When the clock struck midnight, Daniel stood put on his coat and stepped out onto the balcony. The wind carried the distant hum of jet engines. Across the dark sky, an Aerolumen plane cut through the clouds, its lights flickering like a promise. Daniel smiled softly, whispering to himself and to the world still following his story, "The sky belongs to no one. But everyone deserves to fly within it with dignity." 3 months after the Seat 2A incident, autumn had settled over Los Angeles, and the name Daniel Brooks was still everywhere across the media. But this time, people no longer spoke of him as a victim. They spoke of him as the man who had redefined what power means. That morning, the Global Ethics in Service Industry Conference was held in Chicago. Representatives from more than 20 countries attended. CEOs, scholars, politicians, and hundreds of journalists filled the hall. On the main stage, a massive title glowed across the screen, "From Humiliation to Reform: The Aerolumen Case." In the backstage area, Daniel Brooks adjusted the microphone on his lapel. There was no printed speech, no teleprompter. He carried only one thing, the same brown leather briefcase that had been with him the day he walked out of the economy cabin. "Mr. Brooks, are you ready?" Rebecca Hall asked, her voice tinged with emotion. Daniel nodded. "I've been ready since the day they told me to leave seat 2A. When the stage doors opened, hundreds of lights focused on him." The host introduced him. Our next speaker turned a moment of injustice into a global policy of human dignity in aviation. The applause thundered. Daniel stepped onto the stage, the lights reflecting off his face, not the face of authority, but of calm strength forged through pain. He began with a line that silenced the entire room. 3 months ago, I was told I was sitting in the wrong seat. Today, I stand here to say this: no one sits in the wrong seat when they carry dignity within them. He retold the story, but not as a victim. Each detail came out like a lesson about bias, silence, and how an organization responds when its own reflection becomes a symbol of injustice online. "Justice doesn't begin in court," he said. "It begins the moment we decide not to stay silent." On the screen, he displayed Aerolumen's latest results. Customer satisfaction rising from 3.2 to 4.6 discrimination complaints, down 78%. 12 airlines adopting similar training programs. 127 students awarded scholarships through the Brooks Aerolumen Fund. Thousands in the audience rose to their feet, applauding. A European CEO whispered to his colleague, "He's not running an airline, he's running a new era." Amid the camera flashes, Daniel's gaze fell upon the front row, where Ava Lee sat, her eyes glimmering as she raised her hand. "Mr. Brooks," she asked, "if you could go back to that day, would you do anything differently?" Daniel smiled softly. "Yes," he said. "I would buy another seat to invite the person who insulted me to sit beside me and show them that what separates us isn't the class of our seat, but the way we choose to see one another." The room went silent for a heartbeat, then burst into applause. The next morning's headlines read, "Daniel Brooks, the CEO who turned anger into a global moral compass." That afternoon at Aerolumen's Chicago office, Daniel led a special internal meeting. On the table were fresh reports about the Dignity Flight program. COO Patricia Wilson spoke first. "We've reduced over $2.3 million in litigation costs and increased loyal passengers by 14%. But what makes me proudest is this: some flight attendants say they now feel seen as people, not just as employees." Daniel nodded, his eyes warm. "That's when a policy becomes a culture." HR Director Michael Torres added, "The Federal Department of Transportation has sent Aerolumen an official letter of thanks, calling us the new national standard for ethics in aviation. They want to collaborate to expand this model." Daniel was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "We can't change the world overnight, but if every organization learns to place dignity on the same level as profit, the whole world will shine brighter." That evening, Daniel appeared on CBS's program 60 Minutes. The interviewer asked, "What helped you stay calm when you were treated unfairly?" Daniel looked straight into the camera. "Because I understand this anger can make you speak louder, but only calm can make others truly listen." The interviewer smiled. "Do you believe the world is changing?" Daniel replied without hesitation. "It doesn't change by itself, but people can." That night, millions watched the broadcast. On social media, the hashtag #TheSeatThatChanged the World became the #1 trend globally. Aerolumen's stock price rose 9%. But what made Daniel smile wasn't the numbers, it was a single message that appeared on his phone. Emily Parker had written, "I just got hired by a regional airline." During the interview, they asked what I learned from that incident. I said that a person can be taken off a flight, but still lift the world higher if they rise in the right way. Thank you, sir, for not destroying me, but for teaching me how to be human again. Daniel read it silently for a long moment. He didn't reply, but saved it in a folder on his computer, titled Things Worth Keeping. The following week, Daniel was invited to Harvard Business School. The Baker Hall auditorium was packed. On the large screen was written, "The Brooks Framework, Turning Crisis into Culture." Daniel stepped up to the podium, opened his old leather briefcase, and pulled out a faded boarding pass, its corner still showing the faint words, Seat 2A. He held it up under the lights and said slowly, "This is where it all began. A seat doesn't just mark where we sit in a cabin, it reveals where we truly stand in our humanity." The hall went utterly silent. Then Daniel concluded, "If you have power, use it to lift others. If you have a voice, use it to help others be heard. And if one day you're asked to leave your seat, remember sometimes that's how the universe teaches you to lead." When the lights dimmed, students rushed forward for photos and autographs. A journalist asked Mr. Brooks, "What do you consider your greatest achievement?" Daniel looked out the tall windows toward the night sky, where airplane lights blinked in the distance. He smiled. "My greatest achievement isn't in the financial report. It's in the way every Aerolumen employee says, 'Welcome aboard,' to a passenger with heart, not with procedure." As he left the auditorium, the applause still echoed behind him. Outside, the first snowflakes of the season shimmered across the stone steps. Daniel looked up at the sky and whispered like a prayer, "If justice is light, let each person carry a small flame. Together, the world will shine." And he walked on the man who had once been told to leave his first-class seat, now carrying the mission of making the entire sky more worthy of humankind. 6 months had passed since the world first heard the story of the man in seat 2A. Yet in the brightly lit corridors of Aerolumen headquarters, that legacy still lived on, not in slogans, but in everyday actions. At Chicago Airport, a young flight attendant bent down to help an elderly woman pick up her fallen handbag. On her collar was a small pin engraved with the words, "Respect flies first." It was the phrase Daniel Brooks had turned into a global creed. In the Los Angeles office, the internal performance board displayed the latest numbers. Customer satisfaction at 4.8 out of 5, discrimination complaints nearly at 0.47 airlines worldwide had adopted the Brooks Aerolumen framework. Daniel sat in his office as the morning light streamed through the glass walls. On his desk rested the same old leather briefcase, its edges worn, but steady like the symbol of the journey he had walked. He opened it, took out the faded boarding pass, the words, "Seat 2, A barely visible now," and smiled. Not out of pride, but because he knew he had kept his promise to turn humiliation into the foundation of fairness. That afternoon, he met with the executive team. Rebecca Hall reported, "So the Brooks Aerolumen Scholarship Fund has just accepted its 200th student. One of them is Ava Lee. She wants to become a pilot." Daniel smiled gently. She once filmed a video that shook the world, and now she'll be the one guiding it to fly more peacefully. That's the most beautiful form of justice. As dusk fell, Daniel stepped out onto the balcony. The distant roar of jet engines echoed through the sky like the heartbeat of an industry, now moving to a new rhythm, the rhythm of dignity. He looked upward where an Aerolumen 787 climbed into the evening sky, its fuselage glinting in orange-gold light. At the aircraft door, a middle-aged black passenger was greeted by a flight attendant's genuine smile. No one knew who he was, but everyone could see something greater the way he was treated. Daniel closed his eyes, letting the cool wind brush against his face, and thought, maybe I couldn't change the past, but I've changed the way the world walks into the future. As twilight deepened, a voice echoed from the runway speakers. Aerolumen Flight 4. 47, ready for departure. Daniel smiled and whispered softly, as if offering one last farewell to the story that had defined him. Take off. And remember, dignity is the one piece of luggage that must never be lost. 1 year after the Seat 2A incident, the world had changed. Across the skies, hundreds of Aerolumen planes still took off every day, but what made them special was no longer measured in numbers or revenue. It was found in the smiles of passengers, in the eyes of employees, who understood that they weren't just serving, they were carrying dignity from one place to another. At Aerolumen's New York headquarters, a small ceremony was held. The airline's new emblem, a pair of golden wings embracing a blue heart, was unveiled beneath the words, "Fly with dignity. Land with respect." When the host invited Daniel Brooks to speak, he said only one short sentence. The day I was asked to leave, Seat 2A, I thought I had lost my respect. But that was the day I learned that respect isn't something others give you. It's how you choose to face the world, even when it turns its back on you. The applause was thunderous. A few employees wiped their tears, not because of grand words, but because they felt the truth within them, that sometimes to reach the hearts of others, you don't need to speak loudly. You just need to live rightly. That evening, Daniel stood atop the highest floor of the building, looking out over the glittering city lights. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Ava Lee, now Aerolumen's first trainee captain. So my first flight takes off tomorrow morning. I'll be flying the same route as before, from JFK to LAX. I just wanted to say thank you. Because of you, an empty seat that day became a doorway for a whole new generation. Daniel read the message and smiled gently. Beneath the night sky, he saw tiny dots of light planes gliding through the darkness, each carrying a story, a belief, a journey begun anew. The wind swept across the rooftop, carrying with it the hum of traffic, the pulse of the city, and the echoes of memories that would never fade. He closed his eyes, letting the past drift away, like the closing scene of an old film. No more anger, no more pain, only gratitude for the moment that once cost him his seat, yet gave him a rightful place in the history of human decency. An Aerolumen 787 soared across the horizon, its lights glimmering like an artificial constellation. Daniel spoke softly, his voice carried by the wind. Justice isn't the end of a journey. It's the takeoff point for a kinder world. He watched as the plane disappeared into the clouds, his smile calm and content. Somewhere on those steel wings, someone was sitting in Seat 2. A peaceful, respected, and unaware that the very seat beneath them had once changed the entire sky. From the perspective of a specialist in leadership culture and corporate ethics, the journey of Daniel Brooks is not merely the story of a seat. It is a test of how human beings choose to use power. He did not respond with anger, but with action. He did not seek justice for himself, but redefined it for the entire system. Because true justice is not found in punishment, but in the ability to make the world a kinder place. If you believe that dignity is something no one has the right to take away from you, please like this video to spread that message and subscribe to the channel to continue following stories where compassion is tested by prejudice. Before you go, leave a comment below with a phrase that reflects your belief in that value. Keep your dignity.